All good? Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. We're gonna start soon, or now actually. All good? Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the side event Blue Thread, aligning national climate and biodiversity strategies. My name is Marine Lesser. I'm head of international policy at the Ocean and Climate Platform, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator today. But just before I go any further, let me just take the time to thank the different co-organizers of this session, the Blue Marine Foundation, the Ocean Conservancy, the Nature Conservancy, and of course the Ocean and Climate Platform. Like, I think many of you in this room, the four of our organizations actually were in Cali just a few weeks ago for the 16th COP of the Biodiversity Convention, the CBD. And I think it's safe to say that the conference ended with mixed outcomes. The delegates weren't really able to agree on all the issues to advance the implementation of the global biodiversity frameworks, especially on finance and monitoring. And I see some delegates smiling in the room, so I think you see what I'm talking about. But still, and I hope you can agree with me, actually, I think it was a success for the ocean. Especially because we agreed on two critical decisions to advance coastal and marine biodiversity, but also because the ocean community made, and I like the pun, the big splash. We really had, I think, a blue wave of events or different kind of organization. Even Joe Appiot from the CBD Secretariat, our beloved ocean person, said that it was the bluest COP you've ever seen. So even if it wasn't attended, ocean was really present at this COP. I was also delighted to see that the question of synergies between climate and biodiversity was actually very high on the agenda. I think it's really clear for everyone now that if we are to really address the 1.5 and achieve it under the Paris Agreement, we need to have healthy ecosystem. And if we want to stop the decline of biodiversity under the global biodiversity framework, we also need to have climate impacts rapidly mitigated. The climate and biodiversity conventions are highly complementary. They even have similar and compatible structures. But despite this very strong potential that we see for cooperation and alignment, the synergies between the two remain at this point still a bit weak and, of course, insufficient. The interest for these synergies have grown. We've all witnessed it in the last years. We really have seen a movement to break down the silos starting. And I think Cali was really a continuation, if not an acceleration of this movement. And one thing that I wanted to mention particularly is a key decision that we had on climate change and biodiversity, where we really considered the different opportunities to move forwards in terms of synergy. And I'm actually taking this opportunity to also flag that there was a call for views in this decision. So you all have the opportunity to share your views with the Secretariat of the CBD, expressing how we can build these synergies and specifically how the ocean can be part of this reconciliation across the two conventions. One entry point for synergies that we at the Ocean and Climate Platform, but many other organizations are considering and advocating for, is the alignment between the strategies. As of today, national climate and biodiversity strategies are often addressed as separate policy processes. Most of the time we see the NDCs involving ministries and stakeholders on energy, on transport, on industry. And BSAPs, the biodiversity counterparts, are mostly involving the conservation, forestry, and agriculture ministries and stakeholders. So this makes, obviously, coordination really challenging. And the risk is that it might lead to this is very hard to say for a French person, inconsistencies on the ground, on the concrete action on the ground, really undermining all of our different efforts. There's also other risks. I mean, it, of course, will lead to competition that are already on the resources that are already limited. So we really need to have a shift toward a more integrated approach, developing and implementing these strategies in a more holistic manner. We are all, of course, discussing this question of synergies. The question is now the how. How do we make sure we implement them, we carry this forward? And to answer this question, we have the pleasure to have with us Maddie Millington-Drake, who's a senior climate project manager at the Blue Marine Foundation, who is going to tell us about a paper that we recently launched with the Blue Marine Foundation, the Ocean and Climate Platform, and 9 other partners. So Maddie, if you please would give us the honor to come and introduce this paper. Thank you. Yeah, you're there.
Thank you. Oh, I'm going to have to raise this up. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much, Maureen, for the fantastic introduction to my presentation. So we published this brief to show that the ocean has a key role to play in connecting the dots with the ocean, with ocean-based solutions weaving a blue thread across climate and biodiversity synergies. And if you scan the QR code, you'll be able to read it in full. But I'm just going to touch on a few points today. We have a key opportunity to do, as Maureen has already mentioned, the first time the National and Climate Biodiversity Strategy submission cycles overlap, with NBSAPs being due in October 24 and NDCs following in February 2025. So in this paper, we outline 3 main strategies. Firstly, we encourage the building of a common and long-term strategy for greater integration between the Climate and Biodiversity Conventions at the implementation level. Secondly, we advocate for integrated ocean-based solutions that are both climate smart and nature positive, thus contributing to the Paris Agreement and the Global Biodiversity Framework. And then last but not least, we emphasize the importance of activating key levers to strengthen ocean-based solutions within national strategies and build synergies at the technical level. So firstly, on integration, by developing a common long-term strategy to integrate the UNCBD and the UNFCCC, we can enhance policy coherence and alignment between national strategies. Until a mandate for integration is made explicit, coordination will continue to be fragmented and the ocean will remain an underutilized and underused solution to both global ambitions. Maureen has already mentioned the progress that was made at COP16, and this is a great step forward. Another option, which is possibly complementary, would be to create a joint programme of work between the 2 conventions through their subsidiary bodies. The programme could identify the best options for coordinated action and suggest ways to better integrate biodiversity into NDCs and climate objectives into NBSAPs. To support these efforts, we need a better understanding of these interactions, and the IPCC and the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services should strengthen their coordination, and for instance, they could organise a co-sponsored workshop on ocean-based solutions to inform the development of climate-smart and nature-positive strategies. Secondly, and moving on to ocean-based strategies, the brief dives deeper into coastal and marine nature-based solutions, how they can maximise co-benefits for mitigation, adaptation and resilience, and also provide significant benefits for nature and people. The brief also considers trade-offs, looking at measures to avoid and reduce impacts of mitigation measures such as green shipping and responsible offshore renewables. We demonstrate how the ocean breakthroughs can be used as a tool to drive and accelerate ocean-based solutions in 5 key sectors across marine conservation, aquatic food, offshore renewable energy, shipping, and coastal tourism. For those of you who may not be familiar with the breakthroughs, they address the fundamental question of the theory of change about what we must achieve by 2030 to transform the way these sectors operate. And they establish key turning points for each of these sectors, contributing to building a net zero, resilient, nature-positive future. And finally, on levers, there are already numerous levers that we can activate to strengthen ocean-based solutions within these national strategies and ensure their integrated implementation. The brief offers a wide range of options across 3 broad categories: creating enabling conditions, mobilising non-state actors, and monitoring and reporting. So for enabling conditions, finance is a central element to achieving progress, and we therefore need to ensure that climate and nature finance architecture not only aligns but fully integrates ocean-based solutions. For example, COP29's finance negotiations present a critical opportunity to embed this within the global agenda. From a national perspective, climate and biodiversity strategies can be used as roadmaps to guide public funding and attract private investment. And when it comes to the Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 19 on international finance presents an immediate opportunity to develop national biodiversity finance plans that align with existing climate finance strategies. For technical support and capacity building, countries can request technical assistance to enhance ocean-based solutions, ensuring that climate and biodiversity objectives are aligned. Initiatives such as the NDC partnership can help to identify synergies and could play a pivotal role in supporting this effort. It is also crucial that non-state actors should be mobilized, giving special attention to marginalized communities, including coastal, indigenous peoples and local communities. Ensuring inclusive and equitable participation grounded in a human rights approach will help safeguard interests of these communities while preserving the integrity of key ecosystems. Finally, on monitoring and reporting for effective ocean-based action, the development and implementation of national strategies relies on robust mechanisms for monitoring, reporting and review. We must better coordinate these processes across national and collective progress by aligning reporting for frameworks such as the Global Biodiversity Framework and the Global Goal on Adaptation. And we can reduce the reporting burden and support the development of a common set of indicators. So, in conclusion, this is by no means an exhaustive list of opportunities for alignment, but it is evident that the ocean offers many solutions that are both climate smart and nature positive. Ultimately, the blue thread should not stop at the Climate and Biodiversity Conventions, but connect all relevant multilateral frameworks. Successfully addressing the interconnected climate and biodiversity crises undoubtedly depends on the health of the ocean. And so with that, I will conclude, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maddie, for presenting. Oh, no, it's okay. So there was a slide after that with a bit more of the information. But I think ultimately the most important is to have the QR code so that everyone can download this, take a look at it. I mean, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of different options. So it's just about what would work for the different government and how, you know, in our different worlds, we can also take opportunities from that. If you're working, for instance, with the NDC partnership, we have good ideas for you on that. So no, it's all about how can we dive deeper into these three elements. So thank you for presenting these ideas. I think this kickstart the discussion that we're gonna have, and we're very lucky to have actually a female-only panel for today. Not intended, but a great outcome. So thank you so much for being with us. We have on my very left, Anna Marie Laura, Senior Director of Climate Policy for Ocean Conservancy. Then, and you wear many hats, so I had to choose one, sorry for that. We have Angélique Pouponneau, International Lawyer and Advisor for the Sustainable Development Reform Hub, among the many hats, but also working with AODCs, and we'll have the pleasure of you presenting yourself later today. Then we have Ana Paula Prates, Director, Ocean and Coastal Management with the Ministry of Environment of Brazil. So thank you for being with us despite the many panels and many negotiations you're following. And last but certainly not least, we have Luz Gil, Climate and Ocean Advisor with the Nature Conservancy. So I think we can give them a big round of applause just to warm them up. And I also need to think about changing the slides, so here we go. Perfect. I would like to kick this discussion by asking all of you the same overarching question about solutions, because I think what was really clear from Maddie's presentation is that there's these different levers that we can use, but ultimately it's all about designing solutions that are both climate smart and nature positive to make sure that we align and all going in the same directions, hence the need to coordinate across the different conventions. So if you could highlight one specific ocean-based solution that address both biodiversity loss and climate change, which one would you choose and why? And I'm going to start by asking you, Luz, first. So please, if you kick us out, that would be perfect. Thank you. And I need.
Is it working? Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Marine. I think that's a great question and really tough to answer and just to choose one ocean-based solution, but definitely I would choose mangrove conservation and restoration. So the way I like to think about mangroves, I think they are nature's multitaskers. They are great ecosystems. They have multiple functions and potential for mitigation, for adaptation, for protection of biodiversity. And I see many friendly faces here in the blue carbon space and mangrove conservation, so I don't want to be too repetitive, but as many of you all know, mangroves, they have a great potential for mitigation. So these ecosystems, they sequester up to 4 times as more carbon dioxide as terrestrial forest. So that's a great potential for mitigation. Then also these ecosystems, they have a great potential for adaptation. They protect coastal communities against sea level rise, against hurricanes, against erosion as well. So that's a great component for adaptation and for resilience as well. And the benefits, they don't stop here. Also, they have a great potential for biodiversity. So these ecosystems, they are great hubs for fish. They also are nurseries. They also provide a great livelihood to coastal communities that depend on these ecosystems. So yes, that's the ocean-based action that I would choose. And here I think I would like also to speak about, because Marin, you speak about the solutions. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to also speak about the Mangrove Breakthrough, which is an initiative that was launched at COP27, and it's part of the Ocean Breakthroughs umbrellas. This initiative, as I said, was launched at COP27, and it's developed by the Global Mangrove Alliance and the High-Level Climate Champions. And this initiative aims to protect the future of 15 million hectares of mangroves globally by 2030. And this is first by mobilizing $4 billion towards these ecosystems, and also by mobilizing collective action, first to halt the losses of all mangroves, then to restore half of the degraded mangroves, then double protection, and also it has, as I said, a component for financing. So I think this is a great example, first of all, of multi-stakeholder collaboration. We have both governments endorsing this initiative. We also have finance institutions, private sector institutions, all trying to work together. And also, of course, I cannot forget the civil society, NGOs as well, working on this, and IPLCs as well. So all coming together to see how we can protect the future of these amazing ecosystems. So yes, I would stop here, and in the next question I can speak a little bit more about the Mangrove Breakthrough and the policy work that we're doing. But yes, that's my answer on one ocean-based solution.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Luz. I think it's we've heard it a lot at COP28, the potential of the mangroves, making sure that it's mitigation, adaptation, resilience, and biodiversity. But the way that the Mangrove Breakthrough really catalyzed this and make sure that we have everyone around the table to talk about this, I think is really inspirational. So thank you for sharing this solution. And it brings me actually to another side of the discussion, because I think something that we really wanted to highlight in the brief is that we should not only consider nature-based solutions. Don't get me wrong, they're very important, but at the same time, I think it's also interesting to discuss other solutions that are a bit less on our radar. For instance, offshore wind energy, or the decarbonization of the transport industry. So how can we make sure that these decarbonization measures are also nature positive? How can we make sure that we align these two together? And for that, we are very lucky to have Anna-Marie that can answer this question. So if you had one to choose between these different kind of pathways, could you please explain which one would be? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Marine. And it's really nice to be here on this all-female panel. So I would have to pick offshore wind. When you look at the potential of ocean-based climate solutions, there are 2 mitigation solutions that really rise to the top. And the first is moving away from offshore oil and gas. We have to do that. And we're going to have to still generate energy, so we need to move towards renewables. And offshore wind right now has the most potential to help us do that. So I would pick it because there is no net zero scenario for 2050 that doesn't include offshore wind. It has to happen, and we have to address climate change to protect the ocean. And I would also pick it because we know that we can do this responsibly. For a lot of countries, including the United States where I'm based, offshore wind feels new, but it's important to remember that the first offshore wind farms are actually coming up on being de-operationalized. They've been in operation for over 30 years. And so we have learned a lot about how to do offshore wind responsibly. And some of the things that we know about the construction and operations phase have helped us figure this out. So for example, you might hear one of the ways that offshore wind could impact marine ecosystems is the pile driving. This is a noisy activity to have piles being driven into the ocean, and that's actually not dissimilar from some other industrialization energy production. The difference is we can regulate and require protections like bubble curtains being placed, literally double bubble curtains being placed around the monopile. The bubbles come up and the noise in the ocean is significantly reduced. There are other ways that we can reduce impacts, like suction piles. They actually don't drill at all. They suction to the bottom of the ocean floor, and we have to be very mindful of benthic impacts, etc. But there's no pile driving then associated with putting that turbine in place. And I could go on. There's a lot of great passive acoustic monitoring so that we don't do certain activities when there are marine mammals and other critical species or at-risk species nearby. And the same thing can be said for vessels. Obviously, if you're going to do construction operations offshore, vessels and going back and forth, taking workforce on and offshore is going to be a risk. So when do we take people on and offshore? We can avoid the most sensitive areas that mammals, marine mammals, for example, might be going through. And we can full-on stop construction operation during certain seasons when we know really important species are in the area. So these are some of the reasons that I would choose offshore wind. And I would say, from a conservation perspective, it's not obvious. I certainly wish we didn't have to go and build or put more things in the ocean. The reality, and we all know this is because we're here at COP, is that we've actually just waited too long. We cannot afford to wait any longer to make this transition to a clean energy future, and the ocean can be a big part of it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Anna Marie. I think it's clear that there's a lot of different technologies that can be very helpful in terms of making sure that we have nature positive offshore wind deployment, and also different tools in terms of policy planning, also marine spatial planning, but I hope we can discuss that at a later stage. This brings me to my next speaker, Angélique. I'm going to ask you the same question about choosing a solution, and perhaps also you could touch a bit upon the different levers that we can have to help us implement them. Thank you.
Thanks, Marine, and it's really great to be here and to be in a full room. I think the Ocean Pavilion has been consistently a full room, which is really great to see the ocean community here. So with regards to an ocean climate solution, and I'm going to link, because you chose international lawyer as my hat. I'm from Seychelles, so being from a small island, we wear many hats many of the times. But I'm going to maybe choose finance, which is often what brings many people around the table. One of the points I want to make is, of course, we're here sitting at COP29, and we're thinking about this a little bit from sort of that international space, thinking about how regimes speak to each other. But at the end of the day, we need action at national level, at regional level, really making government departments speak to each other. Mm-hmm. And that's particularly, even in small countries, difficult. Maybe for different reasons, not proximity, but even that very difficult. And I want to touch on the Seychelles experience, where there was the creation of a conservation trust fund. And here I'm speaking specifically at the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, where it was initially capitalized by a debt for nature swap and a sovereign blue bond, and people really get excited about, those new innovative deals. But I want to touch about the governance and how this conservation trust fund was actually able to bring different stakeholders around the table to decide how to spend money. Right? And the governance regime, it has a board, majority non-governmental stakeholders, but it sits under the ministry, it's sort of Ministry of Finance aligned, chaired by the Minister of Environment, has the Ministry of Fisheries and Blue Economy, Chamber of Commerce, civil society platform, representative of a fisher, a youth representative. So all of a sudden, this finance mechanism was able to create a governance structure that brings different stakeholders together, that cares about ocean, that cares about climate, that cares about biodiversity. And then thinking together and agreeing together how to spend money in a way that makes all these stakeholders happy. Or at least content. Happy maybe is a big word, but at least content. And I think this is one of the things that we need to think about. I mean, I've looked at it from a finance perspective, but I think there's a lot of questions around the international mechanism, and we're so glad to see CBD COP16 say to one secretariat, speak to your fellow secretariat. But I think it's really important to think about how we have these national coordinating mechanism that really brings these multi-stakeholders together. And of course, money attracts lots of interest, so finance is potentially one of the ways to do it. So I'd say money, money, money can get everybody around the table. Thanks.
That's a very good conclusion, I would say. Money, money, money. Thank you for sharing the example of Seychelles and also the importance of having robust governance mechanism, making sure that we have everyone on the table. And I'm glad you also mentioned non-state actors into the discussion, because ultimately, often they're the ones with whom governments partner on the ground to make sure we implement the decision. So really making sure that everyone is there is particularly important. So thank you very much for that. That brings me to our last speaker, Ana Paula. I think we've heard different organizations speaking, but it's always very different from a government perspective. I know you're conducting a lot of efforts in Brazil to try to align the strategies. So could you please tell me a bit about how you're conducting these efforts? Thank you.
Well, first of all, good afternoon for everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with this female panel, strong one. And in Brazil, we have included a League of Human for Conservation in Ocean. It's very nice to be here. Well, we're doing a lot of work, hard work since last year to include the actions of ocean-based solution inside our industry, at the same time inside of the NBSAPs. The solutions or the project or actions is the same inside both the plan. And we can highlight, for example, in the first question that you said, the one solution, we have not one, but several actions. But I can explain or example with marine spatial planning, because I think outside our bubble here in the Ocean Pavilion, for example, the society doesn't care about ocean yet. And we need to spread this mission of us, is the spread that we need the ocean health for our health. So because that I talk several times and several about this special importance to marine spatial planning for this time, for decarbonization, for example. Because as you said, we have a lot of possibilities to decarbonization use ocean, but we need to health of ocean. Then we need to trade-offs, and we need to tell here, okay, it's a sacrifice place, or here, no, I need to more marine protected areas, and for example, we need more minerals for the batteries, for example, for electrical vehicles, and we need probably to mining in sea, in the ocean. Then we need to coordinate this space. And we think it's our common challenge. And because that, we start to bring together all these issues. And for example, we create the Director of Ocean and Coastal Management inside the National Climate Change Secretary for bring together these two issues. And here in COP 29, Brazil bring the new NDC, and the first time we include in the new NDC the ocean-based solutions. It's a great challenge for us, and we include this for bring together these two issues. And another thing I can say that by integration also based solution, NDCs and BSAPs, we need to put the communication and spread these actions for all the society. I said the example. I heard this week of the stakeholder that said for me, forget coral reefs, because coral reefs probably die. We need to improve the mangroves. They say, no, we need coral reefs. We need to improve the conservation and restoration. We need this because coral reefs is our tropical forest in the sea. And now it's burning like the forest, but we need to spread this communication. That's it.
Thank you, Ana Paula, and please don't give up on the coral reefs. Please don't. I think everyone can agree here in the room. And also congratulations to Brazil for launching the new NDC and making sure that ocean was a part of it for the first time. So congratulations on that. I think it's already, considering especially the coastline that you have, it's a big achievement. So thank you for pushing for that. Yeah, I think we can applaud that. Absolutely. Yes, thank you for that. And I think there's a great parallel between what you were saying and what Angelique was saying as well, between money having to be discussed with everyone and also marine spatial planning being really used as a tool to put everyone around the table to make sure that we discuss the different conflict of interest uses between the different users. So thank you for bringing that up. I think this is also a good opportunity to align the NDCs and NBSAPs, making sure that NBSAPs are spatially explicit to make sure that then we can conduct activities, for instance, the development of offshore wind in a more responsible way. So thank you for bringing this important tool. I'm going back to you now, Luz, to ask you a bit more in detail about what you're doing with the mangrove breakthrough. And I, if I'm not mistaken, heard that you have an NDC task force, so I would love to hear more about that and how you do the multi-stakeholder collaboration, bringing in the voices of the different governments and making sure that they can advance together on the topic.
Perfect. Thanks, Marie. No, I think that's a great question. And yes, and you might have noticed if you have been following COP29 discussions, NDCs are the hot topic together with climate finance right now. And that's because we have a great opportunity with this new cycle to include and to have more ambitious commitments, and especially for the ocean and for blue carbon ecosystems, it's a great opportunity to integrate these ecosystems into countries' NDCs. I think so far, only out of all the countries that have blue carbon ecosystems, only 71, I believe, have included blue carbon ecosystems in their NDCs, either for mitigation or adaptation or for both. So yes, for sure, I think this cycle represents a great opportunity to support governments and to advocate for the inclusion of these ecosystems. As I said, these ecosystems, they have great potential for mitigation, for adaptation, for resilience, for biodiversity protection. So yes, I think that's also something super important. And yes, Maureen, you mentioned the Mangrove Breakthrough NDC Task Force, which is something that I'm very excited to speak about. So actually, this NDC task force was launched at the Substas in Bonn, and it's led by Pew. So I see Annelise here. Pew, they have been leading this effort together with the Global Mangrove Alliance and other members like the Nature Conservancy, the High Level Climate Champions, and yet many other members doing amazing work on NDCs and supporting blue carbon ecosystems. And the purpose of this NDC task force is to support the governments that have endorsed the Mangrove Breakthrough in integrating mangrove positive commitments in their NDCs. So I think previously I mentioned that the Mangrove Breakthrough has been endorsed by governments. So right now we have 30 governments that have endorsed the initiative. So we were thinking that this is a great opportunity. Now that we have these governments that are endorsing the initiative, both at national and subnational levels, we were thinking like how we can actually influence, like passing from this expression of support into actual policy and tangible actions on the ground. So yes, so we started working on this NDC task force, and it aims to provide pro bono support, tailor-based or tailor-made support to governments into including blue carbon ecosystems in their NDCs. We are going to develop a knowledge hub to include different guidances and documents that can support governments into doing this process. Also, we have great experience on the ground, so leveraging that support from all the different organizations that we have on the ground. to support this process as well. Also, we have developed some webinars about best practices on policy, on how to include blue carbon ecosystems. So yes, I think this is a great example as well of this multi-stakeholder and breaking silos that we have been speaking so much about. And also, I wanted to speak about, because also there are some other great resources for governments as well. So for example, there is the blue carbon guidance in NDCs that was developed by BCI, and many of the organizations here were part of this guidance, and it's a guidance that provides different steps on how governments can include blue carbon ecosystems in their NDCs. There's also the Blue Carbon Handbook that was developed by the Ocean Panel, also that provides a great scope on blue carbon ecosystems. There's also the high-quality guiding principles on blue carbon ecosystems. So yes, there are many resources supporting these processes, so happy to speak about that. And yes, and I would close only, if you're interested in the mangrove breakthrough and the NDC task force, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be happy to explain more and to talk about how we can support your government in including these ecosystems in their NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luz, and thank you for this call, for sharing resources, information about the mangrove breakthrough. I think this is very clear that the work has been done. I'm not saying this is over, but a lot of work has been done already to really make sure that we have the appropriate guidelines for the carbon ecosystem, from the publication of the IPCC wetland supplement in 2013 to all the science policy work that has been done to make sure we're supporting countries. My understanding personally is that it has been done for blue carbon ecosystems, but not for all of the different ocean-based solutions. And this is really part of the work that we need to do moving forward to make sure that countries have the tool they need to really develop and implement robust ocean-based solutions that are also integrated. And I know that on one of the sectors, we had Ocean Conservancy doing the work for offshore wind energy. So could you please tell us about the tool that you've just launched, Anna-Marie? Thank you.
So we were really excited here at COP29 to launch the guidance tool for responsible offshore wind in NDCs. And this is created directly for governments to take a look at the NDC in this moment in time to be able to integrate offshore wind. I'd say it's also for us as a community because really NDCs also are their climate and emissions reduction commitments. It is often focused on the energy sector. It's not a language that many of us speak. And so when you're saying like we're going to blue the NDCs, what does that mean? Where do you want them to do that? How can you have that conversation and point to like here, this is where? And so this guidance tool was created to sort of set just a jumping off point for these conversations and talking about does your government that you might go and talk with have a sectoral NDC? So they're actually identifying how much emissions reductions will come from transportation or energy production or waste, food waste, or is it an economy-wide NDC? And we see a lot of economy-wide NDCs setting targets like the government or the collection of governments like the EU will reduce emissions by 55% over a 1990 level by a certain date. And so then you have to dig in and say, okay, if that's their NDC, that's not very sector-based. There's not a ton of room to get really nitty-gritty in there. What's my other options? Well, the governments also submit supplemental documents with their NDCs. For example, the IC2. It's a fun acronym that ocean community might not know, that I didn't know until a few years ago. But it's information to facilitate clarity, transparency, and understanding of how to achieve your NDC. So for example, something that we really need to see to get offshore wind into NDCs are very specific targets being set. There's a lot of resources out there. The International Renewable Energy Agency, for example, and others can help governments say, how much wind potential do I have? How much is accessible? And what's a good target to start with that we could start developing this industry? So they set a target and they use these available resources. To make it into the NDC, then it also needs to be investable. So financially, what will you need? And NDCs have this great tool. They can be conditional on financing. Just because a government doesn't have money to make it happen right now does not mean that target shouldn't go in there. So they can say this target is conditional on receiving financing. And then it has to be measurable. And so what does that mean? Are we going to measure megawatts of installed capacity for offshore wind? Are we going to say it's about energy produced, megawatt hours? Are we going to put milestones for the enabling conditions? So milestones for biodiversity protections, for workforce protections to make this a just and equitable transition. All of this can go in a national plan, and then that plan can be referenced in something like the ICTU or in the NDC itself. So I think one of the really big takeaways here is looking at the different ways governments can succeed. I'll use a US example. The introduction of their NDC says that they will achieve it using ocean-based climate solutions of offshore renewable energy, green shipping, and blue carbon ecosystems. That is it. But it sends a signal that they are going to invest, and then there are more specific plans on each of those topics in their Ocean Climate Action Plan. The EU, Japan, these are some examples that you can find in the NDC guidance tool that we put out. And I think the last thing, maybe I'll leave it there. I think just to build on the marine spatial planning point, because this is what should go in the NDC, but we know it has to be protecting biodiversity. So a National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan required under the CBD, this is where we can look at the mitigation hierarchy, make sure that we're avoiding impacts, that we're then mitigating any remaining impacts, adapting, so we're doing monitoring and measuring to say, okay, we've learned actually that the wind turbines in this area are not hitting as many birds, maybe they're actually affecting bats. And then we can make different changes to turbine speed or color or pattern that now will help birds and bats. And so I just think there's a lot that we can do in the biodiversity side and the action planning. It does not necessarily show up right away in an NDC, and that's where these two speaking to each other and knowing if your MBSAP doesn't include anything on how to avoid impacts from offshore wind, and your NDC includes this great commitment, then we're going to have a problem. And so speaking together as a community and across the government offices, like Angelique mentioned, is really important.
Thank you very much, Anna Marie, for this. I think it's really important, the point you made on the signaling and the fact that having robust ocean-based climate measures and targets as well is very important, because ultimately the more quantified the NDCs are, the most easy it will be for fundings to flow. We really need this signaling to make sure that, for instance, the funding that will flow from the new quantified collective goal on climate finance will also benefit the ocean, because ultimately the ocean might not land in the text, it's not the purpose of the discussion, but we still need to address the question of the how will this benefit the ocean, so making sure that we have clear targets that are quantified can also help this. So thank you for this specific point. And this brings me back to the finance discussion and to you, Angelique, to also ask a bit more about your perspective on COP29 and how it can be an opportunity to advance the synergies. You've been sitting a lot in the negotiations room, so can you please give us a bit of the feeling and how this could benefit the synergies ultimately?
Thanks.
Easy one.
Thanks for that. I think before I go into your question, just to build a little bit on what Louise said, because I think it would be remiss of me, being from Seychelles, not to speak about seagrasses, which of course is mangrove's close friend. And Seychelles, and also to speak to targets and the importance of that ambition. Seychelles in its 2020 NDC committed to map out all its seagrass and mangrove ecosystems, and has finally been able to do that, and that was an early commitment. But then its commitment went further and said that it would protect 50% of its blue carbon ecosystems by 2025 and 100% by 2030. And everybody thought, ooh, extremely ambitious, but we had a marine spatial planning process going on, which meant that Seychelles right now has 99% of its blue carbon ecosystems under some form of protection as early as 2024.
Wow.
So I think just to build on the point that ambitious political signals also attracts more partnerships and funding to come along. But moving to your very specific question around the negotiations, this alignment and building more synergies. As all of you know, the big focus for this COP is finance. And I think it would be ambitious of all of us to assume that we're going to get any strong text on ocean or the synergies piece. I think it's, as you all know, an extremely tense and contentious issue. But that should not dissuade us. I think what we need to think about is, and fingers crossed, we heard from the G20 that they look forward to a successful NCQG. Fingers crossed we do have a successful NCQG and where we actually have an outcome. But I think then that's the next step that we really need to think about. How are we ensuring that there is actually financial flows to ocean? Mm-hmm. Because it goes beyond setting a goal, right? And I think this is one of the important things that we need to think about. And so great to have tools like what Luis and Anna Marie talked about, because one is actually putting it into the policy documents, so putting it into your NDCs, but then two, actually developing them into projects that are investable and financeable. And then, of course, it's, and this is, I think, from my perspective and from a SIDS perspective, quite unfortunate, but we are still a project-based type of system. So then moving that to a project type thing to request funding from the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund, I think it would be amazing if the ocean community could set ourselves a target that the GCF portfolio on ocean climate solutions has to grow from X to Y. And we really work towards how to make that happen. How are we getting more countries excited about getting those projects financed? How are we getting more of those concept notes and project proposals over the line? And of course, that requires all of us. So my main message, I suppose, is don't get dissuaded if you don't see the word ocean. It's okay. The battle does not end there. It's really when we go back home and we work with our governments, with all the stakeholders to actually get what may start off as conditional commitments to be financed and through different sources. I mean, I speak about the GCF, but of course there are many sources of funding that we should look at. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
No, this is fantastic. Thank you very much, Angelique, for bringing this perspective. I think we had a clear message from COP28 with the global stocktake that we need to have more ocean into the NDCs. Now we're discussing the finance point. How do we make sure that we have ambitious NDCs and we allow also developing countries to ensure they have ocean-based measures into their strategies? But ultimately, we need to go at the implementation level and really see how we can work with the different agencies, different entities to make sure that countries who have the interest, and there's a lot of them, actually can carry this interest forward. So thank you very much for that. And since we're on COP29, moving now to COP30, and Ana Paula, I wanted to ask you a bit about your perspective on COP30 as the upcoming COP presidency. How do you think we can work together to promote and advance ocean climate biodiversity in the context of COP30?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, at the host, the COP30, we want to link the climate, ocean, and biodiversity agendas that we start right now in the COP16 with the resolution about biodiversity and climate change, besides the two resolutions of ocean. But we think these opportunities builds included on the momentum generation during our G20. The declaration that last night, where ocean were prioritized after, how can I say, it's a very proud for us because never after that we have this prioritized ocean, where a critical part of the global environmental agenda. And the declaration adopted last night also commitment to robust marine conservation targets and sustainable resource management. which will form a foundation for the discussion of COP30. As our president says, President Lula said in the G20 summit yesterday, even if we stop cutting down any more trees, the Amazon will remain threatened if the rest of the world does not fulfill the mission of containing global warming. Oceans are another crucial climate regulation and potential source of solution. They must also be a priority for our concerns. And Brazil also envisions COP30 also as a platform to elevate the ocean people-climate connection. This will highlight to the critical role of marine and coastal social biodiversity in addressing global climate challenges. By showcasing the interconnected of these systems, we aim to inspire collective action and innovation. And in order to head, we recognize the importance of inclusive dialogue in shaping impactful policies. During the G20, we have a very good experience with the Ocean 20 engagement group held over more than 20 ocean dialogues, strengthening the final declaration with actionable and community-driven proposal. We also need this collaboration between government, NGOs, coastal communities, human and youth to create a strong action and agenda on climate and ocean. And for us, the COP30 is not just an end point, it is a stepping point. We need to build a bridge from the activity of Cali, G20, UNOC next year, and set the stage the bold action at COP30 and COP31 and beyond. Partnerships and support from civil society and other governments will be crucial in maintaining this momentum and drive meaningful integration of ocean-related solutions across global climate negotiation. And last night, we wake up today here with this amazing announcement. We are delighted to announce that President Lula and President Macron commitment to make the protection of the ocean and marine and coastal ecosystem a strategic priority in the bilateral and multilateral commitment to protect the biodiversity and combat climate change. The joint declaration highlights 20 points of convergence, among them strengthening of cooperation on ocean issues, established space for debate on topics of mutual interest during UNOC 3 and COP30. So we invite all the stakeholders, country, civil society, and global institutions to join us in making COP30 a milestone for ocean-based climate action. I think that together in Belém, we can ensure the marine and coastal system are also a priority to the future of climate solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Paula, for this. And actually, as a French person myself, I am very proud of this declaration. So very happy that we can build on that, not only for the collaboration between Brazil and France, but also for making sure that ocean is in the agenda throughout the year 2025, from UNOC to Belém. So thank you very much for that. I think we can have time for 1-2 question top. We have like 5 minutes for questions. So is there anyone from the floor that would like to ask a question? Yes, I see one there. Did you have a question? No? Okay. So I'm going to ask you first if we could get a mic perhaps, otherwise you speak loud and...
Thank you. I can have 2 questions actually, but that will be quick.
Not sure we'll have time, but you can ask.
So there will be the UN Ocean Conference next year in France, and I'm from a French business network actually, so we're quite interested. So 2 questions. Do you have any other expectations from the private sector other than the finance? That I get it's the main point, obviously, but maybe there could be other commitments. And what are the synergies that you can expect between the UN Ocean Conference and the COP30?
Okay, perfect. I'm going to take the other question directly. I think it was on the first.
Thank you very much. Actually, Anna-Maria, I had a question for you. How can we strengthen synergies with the IMO as well, in the spirit of building the blue thread?
Absolutely, it doesn't stop at the Climate and Biodiversity Forum. So I'm just going to perhaps give you the floor first for this question, and then we can go into the private sector one. Angélique going next.
Yeah, sure. So reverse order. I think the IMO, talking about shipping and the IMO is really interesting right now because we know that we have to transition the shipping industry also to be net zero carbon emissions. And the IMO is working on a greenhouse gas strategy to get to net zero by 2050, which is really great. They're also, just within the IMO, in a different body, working on in the greenhouse gas strategy, energy efficiency measures. And then in a different way, they're working on underwater noise. And actually some of the best ways to reduce underwater noise are energy efficiency because propeller and keeping the hull clean, et cetera. And so, and also moving away from fuels, diesel fuels, and towards renewables can also reduce underwater noise. So just in the IMO, in these different processes, there are multiple ways that we can be supporting ocean health and protection while we're moving towards a clean energy future. And so it's exactly the same when we think about support for these strategies. The governments need to be aligned. We often see, and it can go either way, a government being really great at IMO, and then here in the climate COP, they're not so great, or vice versa. And so we really need to make sure that we're holding governments accountable. If they're here talking about climate action, then in the IMO, they need to be supporting that greenhouse gas strategy to get to net zero. And then we also have to be, when we're doing our national biodiversity strategic action plans or our national adaptation plans, thinking about shipping. Because there are all these ways they can protect the marine environment, and their ports and infrastructure need to be thinking about and able to adapt to sea level change, sea level rise because of climate change. We're going to need a lot of new infrastructure that's resilient to fuel a green economy. And if we're not putting that into an adaptation plan, and we're not thinking about where these shipping channels might move to be able to accommodate these green shipping channels, then we're also going to be missing the biodiversity protection. So the blue thread extends, and it sounds like a lot more work for us, but I think we can do it.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. Angélique on the private sector.
Thanks, and it's so great to have somebody from private sector in the audience, not just because money, but I think what I wanted to highlight is ahead of UNOC, of course, is the Blue Economy and Finance Forum that's also taking place in Monaco. And I think there's another really important opportunity for private sector to get involved. And my plea to you would be, not everyone's a believer in the private sector. That ocean climate-based solutions are viable businesses. There's still some disbelief. And I think what the private sector can do, in addition to bringing the money, is actually also showing there is investable projects, there is investable businesses. Like this is good business. This is not just social responsibility. It makes good economic sense. It makes good finance sense to invest in the ocean space. And I think that would be the plea I would have to you to bring your colleagues on board and say, we're a group of financiers and we're willing to invest because it's good for the planet, but it's also good for our pockets. Thanks.
If that's okay with you, for your second question, I'll actually throw my boss under the bus because she's actually working on the UN Ocean Conference with the French government. So Lorelai, sorry for that.
Oh, attends, hold on. Thank you, easier. Hi, boss, under the bus. Hi, I'm Lorelei, I'm the Executive Director of the Ocean and Climate Platform, and I am fortunate enough to be part of the UN Ocean Conference team with the French government, so we're working very hard on making sure that it is the turning point that we need for accelerating ocean governance, but also bringing together all non-state actors, including NGOs that have been extremely mobilized for the ocean, but also the private sector. Obviously, there's such an important link between the UN Ocean Conference and COP30 for a very simple reason. It will be the 10th year anniversary of the Paris Agreement. There is no world in where we don't celebrate that 10 years ago, we managed to get the ocean in the preamble of the Paris Agreement. 10 years later, what is it that we want? How do we get hundreds of countries, or 100 countries, at least all the coastal countries, to include ocean-based climate solutions that we've heard so eloquently today into their national strategies? How do we make sure that we accelerate innovation, but also funding to power the ocean breakthroughs? So there is a very, very strong ocean climate agenda for Nice that will be a stepping stone on the road to Belém next year. Maybe since this has been a topic of interest in the last few days, with regards to the UN Ocean Conference, a few very important things on the logistics side. First of all, if you do not have an ECOSOC or UN-related status, the time for special accreditation is now, so you can go on the UN UNOC website and get it done. Otherwise, there's also the declaration, the outcome, the political outcome of the UN Ocean Conference that is out for review from non-state actors at the moment. So if you have some very urging language that you would like to get across, the time is now. That's for the logistics. In terms of what happens in Nice, I'll let it to the French delegation to answer those questions, right? Otherwise, just a few things on the UN Ocean Conference. Of course, we need the momentum. We need to talk about the 10 ocean action panels that will drive the agenda during the conference. There will be 3 very important special events ahead of time. One, Ocean Science Congress, the Blue Economy and Finance Forum, and the Ocean Rise and Coastal Resilience special event as well. So if you have any questions, please come to me, and otherwise, well, come tomorrow for the Ocean Day, because tomorrow is Ocean Day at COP29. So we'll see you at 11 in the Global Climate Action Room. Thank you so much. Great event. I think that's the end.
I think this is nothing to add on this front. Come tomorrow, I think, is a very good closing. So thank you, everyone, and thank you to the panelists for their great remarks. Thank you.